Welcome back. And tonight we're asking whether mining can be environmentally sustainable and a driver of growth, or whether something is always destined to be lost in that equation. I'm going to go to our jury now. And Johanna, I think I want to start with you because I think starkly, Kolobeni has given us an example of how badly awry things can go. You have the fight by sections of the community there to ring fence them from outside influences, and for them to really be allowed to determine their own fate and the fate of their land. And there are concerns it raises around government, foreign investors, and just ordinary communities and people. So the question is, how do we achieve jobs and growth while protecting the rights of a community like Kolobeni, but it has reference to communities around South Africa?
And I think we need to look more broadly than Kolobeni because it does have certain specific factors. But the history of mining, why it's been so profitable in South Africa for the last century, has been a gross distortion of power balance. With mining companies being able to partner with government, move black communities where they sat on top of minerals away, forcible removals in order to profit, and then to profit from cheap black labor, with lungs being destroyed, particularly from silicosis. So as we move towards having a balanced power relationship between mining companies, the state, and communities, what does that look like? And what we see out of this recent court judgment in Kolobeni is a requirement of full and informed consent. What does that mean? That means the community has an opportunity to consider what is on the table for us on our ancestral land that our ancestors died to protect. Does it make sense compared to alternative development paths, and how are we going to ensure the best possible scenario for ourselves? And so Kolobeni is setting the path for that, but many communities now have the opportunity to catch on to it as well.
All right, but here's the reality, and perhaps Ted and Claudia can weigh in on this one. We have laws in this country. So you have the 2002 MPRDA, and that is the Mineral Petroleum Resources Development Act, and there are certain things built into it which says, you've got to mine in this particular way, but you've also got to be environmentally sustainable, environmentally friendly, and you've got to look after people. Something that's also muscularized by things like the social labor programs. There's been some controversy about companies who peg the ability to execute their SLPs on their profits. So if they don't make profits, they say that they can't fulfill their agreements. But the point is that we do have laws. We have the ability to make those laws muscular. So why do we end up with a situation such as the one that we're hearing about now, which is skewed unjustly in the favor of mining companies? Claudia?
Well, honestly, if I have to be honest, I think it's a matter of, and this is going to sound a bit political, but it's a matter of, okay, so there are laws available, but do we have enough staffing to actually, make sure those laws are properly implemented? Do you understand? It's kind of
enforcement.
Enforcement. It's kind of like the BEE thing. For example, I'm just using that as an example. So there's legislation and whatnot, but there isn't actually a body that enforces that. So, people will find loopholes. That's just how it happens. But just to go back to the whole balance between mining and communities or in the environment, my thoughts are that, yes, we can reach balance between the two, and the key is there has to be commitment from both parties, okay? Extensive communication. It has to be a matter of we're negotiating and not a matter of one is...
Do we really achieve that through negotiation? I mean, that's why we have a proliferation of unions in the sector. I don't want to focus on unions, but I want to focus on the lack of agency, at least on the part of those who might be wanting to challenge the way mining companies do their business.
My personal view is that when it comes to balancing the environment and mining, we need to look at the end use of the land. Look, what's going to happen after the mining? It doesn't have to be specifically the same that was happening before. That's one point anyway. It doesn't have to be the same use as it was before, but it has to be a sustainable, use of the land. I'm going to use Johannesburg right here where we're standing as an example. For example, Johannesburg is here because of mining. I mean, let's face it. If there's no water, there's nothing here. There's no other reason why we're actually living here in Johannesburg. This started off as a mining,
yeah, back in 1885, I think it was.
Exactly. Right? So, but today, we don't depend on mining here. But back then, we didn't have the legislations that we had today. But try having a mine here in Joburg today. So we've learned from our mistakes.
We've learned, but there are a number of legacy issues that still remain behind, Ted, and we know it through acid mine drainage and so on. We know it through the inability or the lack of rehabilitation for sites that were overly exploited. Maybe this is a quick open. I mean, how long, I mean, a mine lasts for a long time in a place, so there are legitimate concerns about whether it will ever be able to be used for something else in future.
Well, a typical life of mine is a minimum 15 years, typically in South Africa up to 40 years. And sometimes exceptionally longer. But, I mean, the problem here is philosophical. The first thing is that under the new legislation, what we've got is we've got social engineering using the mining industry as a tool. That's the first thing. So there's been some interference in the worker-exploiter or miner relationship. The second thing is...
Just explain, refine it for me a bit
I'll get back to that in a moment. But the second thing is everybody thinks mining is good because they want the benefits and the wealth from mining as long as it's not on my doorstep. That's a problem, because it's got to be on somebody's doorstep. And at the end of the day, one needs to balance those interests if you want to go forward as an economy. If you don't want to go forward as an economy, well, that's fine. If then the people who don't like that will move on. But at the end of the day, mining is integral to the growth, in economic growth in most economies.
But who's holding the key right now, Shangarira? Who's holding the keys of power in terms of defining how the power balance in those relationships are going to work on sites that mines want to prospect on and want to mine and exploit, and balancing, what the impact on the environment is going to be?
I think the business community, the multinational companies are still in charge, in my view, and they're dictating the pace. And anything that is done which could be anti, or which is not pro-profiteering, as she put it. They sort of shun that. And I think there's need for a change and a serious drive towards much more investment, which goes towards at least corporate social responsibilities for the communities and so forth.
I want to come back to the boon and the benefit. In some ways, it could be the burden for the economy. I mean, the reality is that mining in 2018 created around 465,000 direct jobs. There was a direct contribution to our economic GDP, or our growth, of 335 billion rand. And the contribution of mining to GDP in total is around almost 7%. Mining cannot go away, Melita.
Iman, I really think that when we talk about economic development, it cannot be economic development at any cost. And so some of that mining should go away. Some of that mining needs to be managed a whole lot better. And certainly when you have communities who say, we do not want this mining on our land, then social justice and environmental justice dictates that those people need to be listened to.
We've had mining in our country for hundreds of years, and I'm wondering, because it's quite a gloomy picture that we're painting, and at the same time, I've just mentioned all these, the numbers around the impact and contribution to GDP. Is anyone getting it right in South Africa? I mean, we've had enough time to learn lessons. We've had enough time to muscularize our laws. Is there any company or organization that stands out as being an exemplar of balance?
Absolutely.
Yeah?
I mean,
Go ahead, Ted.
I'm a bit gobsmacked that the biggest opponents to mining often have the biggest cell phones and wear the biggest jewelry pieces. And without mining, that wouldn't have been around.
Melita, I don't know, are you ready?
That's a fact.
Was this a direct jab? I'll give you a chance to come back, Melita.
The second issue is, it sounds to me that profiteering is a swear word. Now, if a restaurateur or a baker cannot make profit, he cannot survive. And the same goes for mining. So how the spoils are divided, that goes back to the beginnings of mankind. When you have a master and you have a servant relationship. Anybody who's done a little bit of basic law will understand that. Everybody can't be the bus driver. Some people are the passengers. So until we can regulate those relationships properly, there's always going to be some sort of revolt.
All right, let me take the wheel really quickly, Ted. I'm going to come back and we'll explore those themes a little bit further. When we return, we'll get closing remarks from my guests. You're watching Madam Speaker.